why you're seeing this tick up. And Juliet pointed out ICBC, which is up or was up around 3.5%. In Hong Kong trading, of course, last week, ICBC posted its largest one-day gain since 2011. This triple R cut that is targeted, as it were, is expected to pump about 150 billion, up to 150 billion US dollars of liquidity into the system here. So it's going to support the banks, it's going to support their balance sheets and their profits. The idea, of course, is that they focus more of their credit, more of their lending to SMEs rather than state-owned enterprises. So that's why you're seeing this tick up in the financials here. Shanghai Composite up just over 1.5%. That compares, by the way, to the tick up that we saw this time last year after the Golden Week holiday of about 1.5% by the end of the first day's trade, compares to a tick up about 3% at the end of the first day's trade after Golden Week in 2015. So October is traditionally a pretty good month. After the Golden Week, it is traditionally a pretty good month for traders here in Shanghai, here in China. We should also add that there's been some pretty solid numbers in terms of retail sales over the holiday period. Total tourism income added up or increased by about 14% year on year. So those are other positives that will be being factored in by traders here in China.
Tom, also got this private Taishin PMI services survey that was out a little while ago, and that was again showing weakness compared to August.
It was, and it's interesting, isn't it, that the private survey that looks generally at the smaller businesses paints a more negative picture, as you pointed out, compared to the official PMI numbers, because we got the official PMI manufacturing numbers out on September the 30th. Then we got the private survey PMI manufacturing data that came in below. Of course, the official manufacturing numbers surprised quite strongly, the biggest pickup that we've seen since about 2012. Now we've got the services and the composite. The services coming in at a 21-month low, 50.6 versus 52.7 in August, and then the composite coming in at 51.4 versus 52.4 in August. You, of course, spoke to Hao Hong from BOCOM, the strategist there. He said he wasn't too concerned about what he was seeing in these private Taishin services PMI numbers. Take a listen.
It's not a huge surprise to see today's numbers slightly below expectation, but the way I use a PMI figure really is to use it as a sentiment index, because it really is a survey for many manufacturers and service providers in Chinese economy. And the Taishin PMI focuses on the smallest part of the Chinese economy, so it's not surprising to see it's slightly below expectation.
We are expecting FX reserves as well out at some point today. The expectation is for those to come in at about 3.1 trillion US dollars for the month of September, up from August marginally. Bloomberg Intelligence saying there's a number of factors leading into this pickup in the FX reserves pile here in China. The capital controls, of course, that remain in place, the relatively strong growth we've got, and the inflows that we're getting now as China gradually continues to open up its markets, particularly with the Bond Connect. A couple of pressures on the other side in terms of the FX reserves, though, of course, are the weakening yuan, and we saw that fix again lower today. Also, the curbs on the real estate market, they're starting to bite. Those are a couple of factors that may push against these FX reserves. Still, the expectations are for 3.1 trillion approximately. Of course, overshadowing all of this data is this big political event, the Party Congress, kicking off October the 18th. Policymakers here focused on trying to ensure there isn't too much volatility ahead of that big event.
Nice one there, Tom McKenzie, joining us from Beijing. Well, still to come this hour, unravelling Indonesia's spending mystery, why 8 interest rate cuts and rising wages are failing to convince consumers to splash the cash.
And next up for debate, how did Shinzo Abe fare against his rivals when they went head-to-head on Japan's big economic issues? This is Bloomberg. Japan's political leaders duked it out in their lone debate ahead of the snap election on October 22nd. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe maintained his support for monetary easing, while Tokyo Governor Yuriko Koike said she's still mulling taxing corporate Japan's cash reserves.
Our Chief North Asia correspondent Stephen Engels following the election and joins us now. And, well, what stood out in this debate and who won?
Well, I don't know if you can say who won, but what you can say is definitely this is going to be, for Shinzo Abe, an opportunity to maintain that two-thirds majority in Parliament, of course, which is critical to him pushing forward further monetary easing, further Abenomics.
And constitutional change possibly as well.
Possibly constitutional change. And also he's sticking to his guns on the consumption tax by 2019 to help pay for a lot of these economic stimulus package and other measures, paring down the debt and social welfare initiatives. For Koike, it was a chance to be on this stage, sitting right next to Mr. Abe. She is not running for a seat, keep in mind, so she will not be the prime minister unless she changes course dramatically in the next 24 hours. But this was a chance for her to bring her platform to a national stage.
But when it came to what one might call a backtrack, perhaps, on this taxation of corporate reserves,
yes,
what might they say about the flexibility, if you will, for that party?
Sure. So there's a huge wealth of these corporate tax holdings that these Japanese corporates have, and she wants to tap into that. I have the figure here. Corporate tax resources exceed $2.7 trillion US. Retained earnings tax that she has proposed could raise about 6 trillion yen. She's not committed fully to that. She is saying she's open to perhaps not doing that or various parts of that instead of that consumption tax. She would call for a complete freeze of the consumption tax plans for 2019 because looks what happens in the 1990s when they went from 3% to 5%, and also later when they went from 8% or 5% to 8%. Recession followed.
Yep, we saw what happened last time. Again, it was amazing how retail sales just fell off a cliff, didn't they, at that stage? The other point, I guess, what should I say, sticking point between the two is nuclear power, isn't it? Yeah, nuclear power, of course. You've seen a number of different protests, if you will, over the last few years, since 2011, of course, in the Fukushima disaster. So this is a key one. Shinzo Abe has said he will seek to reduce Japan's reliance but scrapping it entirely is not a responsible energy policy. Koike is calling for zero reliance by 2030.
So I believe that we have a shot on this.
Oh, okay. Well, we actually now have these comments. Let's go back to back. Abe and Koike talking about their economic priorities.
There's increasing talk of tapering, but with Japan still not completely out of the deflationary era, that's premature. Governor Kuroda and I are in complete accord on the 2% inflation target, but the decision about how to achieve that belongs to the BOJ.
Abe's reforms have been way too slow, and we need to accelerate the speed of change. Therefore, we hope to present clear policies and hope the voters choose us.
So obviously that was an interview Ms. Koike had with a television station, not at the debate, but Abe, of course, that comment from the debate.
Steve, thanks a lot for that. Let's get you to our guest, Gregory Noble. He's Professor of Political Science at the University of Tokyo. Professor, Gregory, how did you view this debate? Were there any clear winners? And how legitimate is Koike as a political opponent?
Well, I think she's quite competent, clever even, and she's trying hard to appeal to average urban dwellers and not just to special interests and the corporate sector. But I think it's important not to look just at policy or ideology. What drives most elections is perceptions of competence, and although the LDP has made many mistakes, it has been in power for a long time, and it does have the trust of the corporate sector and many other establishment elements of Japan, and Koike is often seen as something of an opportunist, and clearly her party is new and untested. So I think it's the LDP has a built-in advantage.
So a built-in advantage for the LDP, and it's typically difficult to challenge an incumbent given the nature of Japan's political system. And at the weekend debate, we had Koike say she will not run for parliament. Where does this put the opposition party and the leadership thereof?
Well, it puts her in a very difficult position. She took advantage of an opportunity, but she's got a real problem, which is that if she does run for the Diet, she has until tomorrow to decide. She had said she won't, but if she did, then people would say, hey, I thought we elected you to be governor of Tokyo to fix some things. On the other hand, if she doesn't run, which is what she's saying she's going to do, then the problem is who's going to run the party and how will they coordinate? These are the same issues that plagued the Restoration Party of Hashimoto Toru, the former governor of Osaka, and it's quite possible that Koike could become Hashimoto Redux, Restoration Redux.
What do you mean by that?
The Restoration Party was an Osaka-based party which attempted to expand nationally, and for a while, as an opposition alternative to the LDP, it did pretty well, but it fairly soon fell apart. There's just an imbalance between running as a local party in Osaka and a national party, and Koike is in danger of running into exactly the same problem.
So fragmentation of those who oppose the LDP, but taking a look at the economic picture under Shinzo Abe, we have seen a recovery of growth, and in recent data, we have seen this continuation of that picture. What could perhaps allow for a challenge that could really shake the LDP in this?
I'm not sure we're going to see a challenge that really shakes the LDP. It might really shake Abe because the LDP was likely to lose seats anyway. It won a huge victory last time. Whenever a party wins a huge victory, that means it also wins seats that are actually somewhat favorable to the opponents. So it's almost natural to lose seats after a big victory. And in addition, Abe has had a couple of scandals, and Koike is a charismatic and clever politician. So Abe and the LDP may very well lose quite a few seats, but that's a different thing from saying they'll actually lose the election. And then the question becomes, who has a greater power to persevere? I'm afraid I'd put my money on the LDP.
Gregory, thank you so much for joining us. Gregory Noble there, professor at the University of Tokyo.
All right, one feature on the Bloomberg we'd like to bring to your attention is our interactive TV function. You can find that on the terminal at TV Go. You're not only going to be able to watch us live, but also see previous interviews and dive into any of the securities or Bloomberg functions that we have been talking about. And you can become part of the conversation by sending us instant messages during our shows. But keep in mind, this is for Bloomberg subscribers only. Check it out at TV Go. U.S. earnings season gets into gear this week. Remy Inocencio has the details on what to watch.
It's earnings season yet again in the United States, and expectations are positive for the S&P as we wait for those numbers to drop. And you can see this in #BTV3639. Now, the blue line here is the forward 12-month EPS. The white line is the trailing 12-month, and the gap towards optimism is at its widest since pre-crisis levels. Now, with that said, Wall Street has cut its S&P growth forecast by more than half to 3.6%. The silver lining is that downward revision has more to do with all those hurricanes that hit, so it may be very well short-lived. Earnings are expected to rebound in the fourth quarter at an average pace of about 11% through June. Now, it's not just optimism for U.S. companies, but globally, too. Take a look at #BTV7737. Now, analysts have been revising their forecasts upward all this year, and that's thanks to bets on growth as well as inflation. For example, the World Bank is forecasting global growth to hit 2.9% in 2018 from 2.7% this year. It also just raised its 2017 growth forecast for East Asia and sees year-on-year growth for the United States. And of course, on interest rates and inflation, those Fed fund futures, those are now pricing in a near 80% chance of a hike this December. Now, looking ahead to later this week, the big U.S. banks report, and analysts are all raising their profit estimates. Check out #BTV8124. This is Citigroup's Bank Revisions Index. So upgrades outweigh the downgrades by the most since, well, looking at this, you guessed it, ever since the financial crisis, and banks are forecast to see earnings growth of 5.7% this quarter. Coming up this week, JP Morgan, Citibank Thursday, then Bank of America and Wells Fargo on Friday. And those are the three Bloomberg Terminal charts you need to know as we head into earnings season yet again. Remy Inocencio, Bloomberg News, New York.
Well, let's take a look at some of the latest business flash headlines out there. First of all, taking a look at Australia. Mantra Group is soaring in Sydney. This after receiving an offer from Europe's biggest hotel operator, Accor, offering $3.96 a share in cash. It's a deal which would be worth around about $930 million and has been also given access to the books. A deal would see Accor take control of a hotel operator with more than 20,000 rooms across Australia, New Zealand, as well as Indonesia.
The Sunday Times says HSBC has picked its head of retail banking and wealth management, John Flint, to be the new CEO and has asked the Bank of England for permission to make the appointment. The paper says the board approved